Welcome to Weekly News Highlights, where we wrap up your week with a glimpse back into what went on over the past week. I'm Kim Dami in Seoul. South Korea's on-year consumer prices accelerated by the most in 5 months in September, all due to higher oil prices and soaring prices of some farm goods. The government is promising to tame inflation. The second round of Japan's Fukushima wastewater release began on Thursday. Tokyo is letting go of 7,800 tons of the stored wastewater until October 23rd. Busan International Film Festival is in full swing for its 28th edition. Asia's biggest film festival is screening nearly 300 movies across Busan until the 13th. The second round of Fukushima wastewater release by Japan is now underway and will last for the next few weeks. And South Korea is keeping a close eye on the discharge to make sure the process is safe and sound. Our foreign affairs correspondent Peunji reports.
Japan has begun to discharge a second batch of wastewater from the Fukushima nuclear power plant into the sea. Just like the first batch that was released from August 24th to September 11th, a total of about 7,800 tons of water will be heading into the Pacific Ocean. The process will take 17 days until October 23rd, meaning around 460 tons a day will be released. The South Korean government confirmed at a press briefing that the plant operator began the process on Thursday morning.
The Tokyo Electric Power Company started to release the second batch of water at 10:30 a.m. and our inspection team is also currently monitoring related data. As I have said before, our government will do its best to make sure that it does not affect the health or safety of Koreans.
But despite government reassurances, civic groups in South Korea rallied outside the Japanese embassy in Seoul on Thursday, holding up signs that read, "Stop ocean dumping." The protesters urged Japan to immediately halt the release process, saying samples of the second batch of wastewater contained a small amount of radioactive material, such as cesium. They said this shows that the ALP system cannot remove radioactive material from the wastewater completely, and that they cannot trust the Japanese government that's been saying the water is safe. Meanwhile, a Chinese local news outlet also strongly criticized Japan's latest move. Citing Einar Tangen, a senior fellow at a Beijing-based think tank, the Global Times on Thursday called Japan a rogue nation, saying that it was releasing nuclear garbage without addressing concerns from its neighbors or its people. This comes as Japan was hit hard by China's decision to drastically cut Japanese seafood imports. In August, when Japan began the first release, imports fell by around 70% compared to the same month a year earlier. Despite concerns, Japan plans to discharge about 2% of the wastewater stored in the Fukushima power plant by March next year. A total of 1.34 million tons of water, enough to fill 500 Olympic-sized swimming pools, will be discharged over the next 30 years. This means Japan will have to release a larger amount of water starting next year. Peunji, Arirang News.
North Korea last week set in stone the expansion of its nuclear forces in its constitution. South Korea's military says the North will face the end of the regime should it use nuclear weapons. Our defense correspondent Choi Min-jung has the details.
Seoul's defense ministry has warned that should North Korea use its nuclear weapons, this would bring about the end of its regime. Wednesday's warning comes after Pyongyang last week enshrined its status as a nuclear power in its constitution. The ministry said South Korea's military possesses a joint Seoul-Washington readiness posture that can overwhelmingly respond to any attack from North Korea. It added such threats to peace and stability will further isolate North Korea from the international community and worsen the suffering of its people. Pyongyang's constitutional amendment stated its ambition to advance its nuclear capabilities, reinforcing that denuclearization is not up for discussion. In fact, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un vowed to accelerate nuclear weapons production to deter, quote, U.S. provocations. The regime's state-run media reported on Wednesday that North Korea's defense ministry criticized the U.S. for describing the North as a persistent threat on its new strategy on countering weapons of mass destruction. It added that the world's biggest threat from weapons of mass destruction comes from none other than the U.S. The ministry accused Washington of increasing nuclear threats, referring to the joint military drills with South Korea and the deployment of its strategic nuclear submarine near the Korean peninsula. On that note, the North Korean military pledged to counter the U.S. military tactics, with the most overwhelming and sustained response strategy. Though such a response from the North is not unusual, the latest exchanges come as there are growing concerns that North Korea and Russia are pushing for an arms deal. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
High inflation is again becoming a headache for ordinary people here in South Korea. From the price of go-to everyday food products like milk to even subway fares, everything seems to be on the rise. Joining me is our business correspondent, Shin Ha-young. Welcome, Ha-young.
Great to be here, Tammy.
So, Ha-young, I'd like to start with the latest figures for consumer prices. What are the numbers?
Well, for September, South Korea's consumer prices rose by 3.7%, which is well over 3%.
Right. Arirang's Park Gun-woo actually summarized that situation of the September inflation. Why don't we take a look at it first?
Sure.
Consumer prices in South Korea saw their biggest jump in 5 months in September. According to Statistics Korea on Thursday, the Consumer Price Index, a key gauge of inflation, rose 3.7% year-on-year last month, mainly due to high prices for oil and agricultural products. The cost of petroleum products had dropped almost 26% on-year in July, but rising oil prices in recent months pushed the on-year drop to 4.9% in September, significantly affecting inflation. Prices of agricultural products rose 7.2% on-year last month. Among them, fruit, especially apples and peaches, saw the biggest on-year rises since October 2022. This was caused by poor weather during summer, leading to smaller yields and less fruit being exported. The CPI has been plunging since January this year, when the index was 5.2%, the highest in 2023, dropping as low as 2.3% in July. It rose to 3.4% in August, and again in September to 3.7%. Core inflation, excluding volatile food and energy price changes, also jumped 3.3% on-year in September. At an emergency economy meeting in Seoul on Thursday, Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho said that inflation will ease as seasonal factors, such as heat and heavy rain, are no longer a concern.
Along with slowing service sector prices, which are usually a major factor for inflation, and core inflation remaining at the 3% level, inflation is expected to stabilize from October.
He added that the ministry will do its very best to stabilize inflation amid uncertainties.
But as price uncertainty remains due to factors such as the recent volatility of oil costs, the government will remain on alert to try to address rising prices through all means.
Park Gun-woo, Arirang News.
As we have just seen, inflation shows signs of slowing in the first half of this year. So in July, the government even slashed its inflation outlook for the year from 3.5% to 3.3%. But in the following 2 months, the increase expanded consecutively due to higher oil costs and rising prices for some farm goods.
Now, speaking of rising prices, more price hikes in several other fields are also on the way. Now, walk us through some of the changes, please.
Well, rising milk prices could be burdensome for frequent buyers. And this is because South Korea's major dairy companies have raised their prices for a liter of milk by around 3 to 6% to almost 3,000 won or just over $2. And this comes after the Korea Dairy Committee raised the price of raw or unpasteurized milk starting in October by 8.8% to 1,084 won, which is about 80 US cents per liter. And this is the steepest increase since 2013, when the country introduced its unique system of determining raw milk prices based on production cost rather than supply and demand to protect dairy farmers and facilitate better prices negotiation. And businesses like bakeries and cafes that heavily rely on milk as the primary ingredient for their products are also expected to be hit hard by the extra cost. And consumers too will be hit hard by rising milk prices, with skyrocketing shopping cart prices already putting a dent in their wallets. Now let's take a listen to what some consumers had to say.
As I get older, I find myself drinking about a glass of milk a day, so I tend to choose buy one get one free deals. The cost of dining out has increased to over 10,000 Korean won per meal. I wonder how young people are managing their budgets.
It seems like the prices of meat and seafood have really gone up. Not only that, but it also seems like manufactured goods have climbed as well. There were things that used to be relatively affordable in the past, but now rising prices made me hesitate to buy them.
Hayoung, as a person who goes grocery shopping at least once a week, it's not just milk. What are other products that are also on the rise in terms of price?
You're right, Tammy. Global sugar prices have already hit a 12-year high, hinting at the increased processed food prices for the rest of this year. According to the London International Financial Futures and Options Exchange, about a week ago, the price surpassed $720 per ton. And sugar prices have been falling since surpassing $800 in 2011 and remained at around $500 a ton until last year. And this is due to recent severe droughts and abnormal weather conditions, which have been affecting major sugar exporters. And in particular, India, recognized as the world's largest sugar-producing country, has experienced a sharp decline in sugarcane harvest due to droughts.
And global oil prices, which have been on the rise recently, sank more than 5% on Wednesday. Now, that marked the biggest single-day drop in more than a year. Still, people in South Korea are experiencing pretty costly gasoline costs, right?
You're right. Following the tightened oil supply from the OPEC Plus, rising oil prices is another concerning factor. According to the Korean National Oil Corporation, as of Monday, the average price of gasoline at gas stations nationwide has increased for 12 consecutive weeks. In fact, the current domestic gasoline prices is approaching 1,800 Korean won per liter. And in response, Seoul's Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho stated in a press conference on Thursday that if the global oil price do not stabilize, the government will actively review extending the fuel tax cut measures for 2 more months, which is set to expire at the end of this month.
And another worrisome fact is the rising transportation fare, right?
That's right, Tame. And it is also one of my concerns since I frequently use public transportation. And in fact, subway fares in the capital region have increased starting from October 7th. The Seoul Metropolitan Government announced earlier this week that the basic single-ride subway fare for an adult will be set at 1,400 won, about $1, roughly 10 cents higher than before. The rise is the first in 8 years after a series of meetings on inflation held by the city government's Transportation Fare Adjustment Committee.
Now, Hayoung, will it be difficult to see actually inflation cooling down within the year?
Well, as we've seen in our colleagues' reports, Seoul's finance minister expects the inflation to be eased in October. And meanwhile, one expert I spoke to pointed out the base effect as a factor for the recent rebound in inflation. And this is because the inflation rate had been gradually cooling down due to the base effect, as inflation rates last year were high. But now, as the base effect diminishes, the real inflation rate is becoming apparent. And he also emphasized easing inflation expectations as a measure for the government to control inflation. Take a listen.
If everyone starts expecting prices to keep going up, it tends to trigger a continuous rise. So easing inflation expectations is crucial. That means the government needs to demonstrate its commitment to price stability, securing trust from the public regarding the matter.
Earlier this week, Seoul's top office said the Yoon Suk-yeol administration will focus on improving the cost of living and continue to manage price levels in the fourth quarter of this year.
That will definitely be the #1 priority of the Yoon Suk-yeol administration for the fourth quarter. Let's see what specific measures will be rolled out to actually make economic affairs and people's livelihoods more affordable.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, Hayoung, so much for filling us in today.
Always my pleasure.
Alfred Nobel, a Swedish chemist who invented dynamite, said in his will that he bequeathed all of his remaining assets to be used to establish 5 prizes. Now, they are better known as the Nobel Prizes. And this year, a Nobel Prize in Chemistry went to 2 Americans and a Russian scientist for their discovery and synthesis of quantum dots. But the winners were announced early in a rare slip-up. Isin has more.
The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences announced Wednesday that 2 Americans and a Russian scientist jointly won this year's Nobel Prize in Chemistry for their discovery and synthesis of quantum dots.
The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences has decided to award the 2023 Nobel Prize in Chemistry in equal shares to Monje Bavendi, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, USA, Louise Bruce, Columbia University, USA, and Alexei Yekimov, Nanocrystals Technology Incorporated, USA, for the discovery and synthesis of quantum dots.
The three U.S.-based Nobel Prize laureates took the prize for their work with quantum dots, or tiny particles that are just a few atoms in diameter and whose electrons have constrained movement. Their work showed how they absorb and release visible light, allowing for very bright colors, ultimately contributing to numerous applications ranging from QLED screens to imaging in biochemistry, medicine, and much more. The dots emit different colors depending on their size, with larger dots shining red and smaller dots shining blue. The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences also noted that the work with quantum dots will also allow for surgeons to find tumors more precisely, as the particles catalyze chemical reactions and their clear light can illuminate tumor tissue. The announcement of the winners was, however, leaked prematurely. Sweden's public broadcaster SVT said the Academy sent a press release by mistake early Wednesday that contained the names of the winners. The Academy says it's still unknown why the press release was sent early and expressed regret over the matter. Meanwhile, the three scientists share not only the top honors for their contribution to science, but also $990,000 in prize money. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
And a pair of scientists who developed the technology that led to the mRNA COVID vaccines have been awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine. There are Hungarian professor Katalin Karikó and her American colleague Drew Weissman. The technology had been given to millions of people around the world to protect them against the coronavirus and used as a groundwork to study other diseases like cancer. And the Nobel Prize in Physics was given to a trio of scientists who conducted experiments that created extremely short laser pulses, which they used to capture and study rapid processes inside atoms. Our Lee Seung-jae has the details.
The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences announced Tuesday that it had awarded this year's Nobel Prize in Physics to three scientists.
The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences has decided to award the 2023 Nobel Prize in Physics in equal shares to Pierre Agostini, The Ohio State University, USA, Ferenc Krauss, Max Planck Institute for Quantenoptik, Garching, and Ludwig Maximilians Universität München, Germany, and Anne Luyer, Lund University, Sweden, for experimental methods that generate attosecond pulses of light for the study of electron dynamics in matter.
Their experiments created extremely short laser pulses that were used to capture and study rapid processes inside atoms, where an attosecond is a mere quintillionth of a second. Simply put, an attosecond is to a second what 1 second is to the age of the universe. Their work demonstrated that such short pulses can be used to study how electrons behave. As electrons move incredibly fast, in billionths of a second, they appear as blurs under the most advanced microscopes. However, through nanosecond physics, it will open a world of important processes inside atoms and molecules with sharper focus. Meanwhile, this year's Nobel Prize in Physics was all the more important as Anne Luyer became just the 5th woman in history to win the award. During a press conference on Tuesday, the Nobel Physics laureate stressed the importance of more women aiming to win the Nobel Prize, especially in physics, a subject where there is the least amount of women. The trio of Nobel Prize winners will also share the prize money of 11 million Swedish krona, or $991,000. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
And down in the country's port city, Busan, Asia's biggest film festival, the Busan International Film Festival, is now back. The scale of the event itself is not as big as previous ones, but still, it's just as glamorous and eventful. Our culture correspondent Song Yoo-jin was there.
For this week and next, South Korea's southern port city Busan transforms into a dazzling hub of cinematic celebration. The annual Busan International Film Festival raised its curtains with the opening ceremony on Wednesday. Actors and filmmakers from around the world graced the red carpet at the Busan Cinema Center. So the Busan International Film Festival, BIFF as it's also known, is the first international film festival here in Korea and has also become the largest in Asia. Now this year, 209 films from 69 countries have been invited for official screening. This is slightly fewer than last year, mainly due to budget constraints and internal committee issues. But this downsizing did little to dampen the festivities. Korean actor Song Kang-ho, who won the Best Actor award at last year's Cannes Film Festival, welcomed guests at the opening ceremony. Adding to the star-studded lineup was Hong Kong actor Cho Yun-fat, attending to accept the Asian Filmmaker of the Year award. For the first time in BIFF history, actress Park Eun-bin took the stage as the sole host for the opening ceremony. The opening film was Because I Hate Korea by Korean filmmaker Jang Gon-jae. The audience's excitement was palpable even before the ceremony began.
Because I'm a big fan of Parasite. It was my first Korean movie I saw in France in a theater, and I fell in love with Korean cinema.
I'm a huge fan of Chow Yun-fat's work, and I was really into Hong Kong movies last year. I can't wait to see him in person.
There's a variety of cinematic highlights throughout the 10-day festival. A special program titled Korean Diasporic Cinema will shed light on Korean-American actors, directors, and films such as Minari, Searching, and Past Lives. The inaugural edition of the Asia Contents Awards and Global OTT Awards is scheduled for Sunday. Its predecessor, the Asia Contents Awards, recognized TV and streaming service content only from Asia, but this year it expanded its award coverage worldwide. So, if you're in search of a movie-filled adventure, Busan welcomes you with open arms until October 13th. 송유진, Arirang News, Busan.
We thank you for watching Weekly News Highlights. Enjoy the rest of the weekend.